Good morning, everyone. The board is in session for an emergency board meeting that we're having to consider the declaration of a local state of emergency in response to coronavirus COVID-19. Just so the board is aware, we're going to do two things mainly today. One is a motion to suspend the board's rule of procedure, which I'll get to in a second, and then obviously is adoption of a declaration of emergency, which I will read, and after I read the document, we will open it up for any discussion that board members may have. Clearly, as people can see, we are spacing in adherence with CDC guidelines, and we have limited skeleton staff here today because, frankly, our folks are working hard out there in the community to make sure our community remains safe. What you will see at the dais today, you can see us, but also with us, of course, we have a full board here, all 10 members, Supervisor Walkinshaw and Supervisor Alcorn, because of the spacing, are down here in front of us. But for the public's standpoint, want to make sure everybody is clear that we have all 10 board members present here today. And so our first item of business is to call for a motion to suspend, and I would
Mr. Chairman,
recognize Supervisor Pennygross.
Because this is a special meeting and it's a national crisis, could we start with the Pledge of Allegiance?
We can do that.
Do I need to make this motion before we do that?
I believe, yeah, let me ask the county attorney that question.
You can certainly make the Pledge of Allegiance first.
Okay, we'll do that in that order then.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, I would first call on Supervisor Gross for a motion to suspend the board's rule of procedure number 1.2, and specifically the provisions calling for notice of a special meeting to be sent by certified mail or served by the sheriff on board members 5 days before the meeting. Supervisor Gross.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, board members were notified of this emergency special meeting by an email communication sent by the clerk, and the meeting was immediately posted on the public meetings calendar and publicized by the county. We obviously all received that notice, as evidenced by our attendance here today. Therefore, I move that the Board of Supervisors exercise its authority to suspend its rules of procedure and dispense with any requirement for the clerk to notify board members of this meeting 5 days in advance by registered mail or service by the sheriff. So moved.
I'm happy to second that along with several of my colleagues. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Supervisor Gross. Our second agenda item is the declaration of emergency, and everyone should have a copy of both the resolution. Does everyone have a copy of the resolution?
No, it was circulated by email, but we do not have printed copies.
Okay. There should be two documents. One is a copy of a resolution, and one is the actual declaration of local emergency, which is signed by County Executive Hill. The resolution is very close in language to the actual declaration itself, and so as that is being circulated, I will read the resolution. After I read the resolution, I will make a motion to approve this, and then we will have discussion of it. And the resolution reads, at a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors of Fairfax County, Virginia, held in the Board Auditorium of the Government Center at Fairfax, Virginia, on Tuesday, March 17, 2020, at which a quorum was present and voting, the following resolution was adopted. Whereas, as a result of the potential spread of COVID-19, a communicable disease of public health threat, the Governor of Virginia declared a state of emergency on March 12, 2020, and directed local governments to render appropriate assistance to prepare for this event, to alleviate any conditions resulting from the situation, and to implement recovery and mitigation operations and activities so as to return impacted areas to pre-event conditions as much as possible. And whereas on March 13, 2020, the President of the United States declared a national emergency beginning March 1, 2020, due to the outbreak of COVID-19. And whereas cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed in the Fairfax Health District and the potential impact of the spread of COVID-19 is of sufficient severity and magnitude to warrant coordinated local government action to prevent or alleviate the damage, loss, hardship, or suffering caused by the existence of this communicable disease of public health threat. And whereas due to the potential spread of COVID-19, the potential for substantial injury or harm to the population necessitates the proclamation of the existence of a local emergency. And whereas the Commonwealth of Virginia Emergency Services and Disaster Law of 2000, as amended and set forth in Chapter 3.2 of Title 44 of the Code of Virginia, authorizes the Director of Emergency Management to declare the existence of a local emergency with the consent of the governing body. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Fairfax County consents to the declaration of local emergency by the Director of Emergency Management effective March 17, 2020. I would so move.
Second.
It's been moved and multiply seconded.
Okay. Since you made the motion, do you want me to do the discussion?
Yes. Why don't you do that?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
Madam Chairman.
Yes. Supervisor Alcorn.
Yeah, just so I understand the sequence here. So this is our resolution. How does this relate to the declaration of local emergency that is the other document? What's the sequence?
I will begin and allow the county attorney to complete. The resolution is basically what gets signed by the clerk, which outlines the action we take, which is to approve the language that's in there, which is largely consistent with the declaration itself, which gets signed by the county executive. County attorney, want to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Alcorn, that's absolutely correct. Under the Virginia Code, the declaration of local emergency is actually signed by the county executive, Brian Hill, as the Director of Emergency Management as defined in that code provision. The Board of Supervisors' role is to confirm the issuance of that declaration of emergency and essentially approve it and consent to it.
Additional discussion and a question. That's pretty much the same procedure we use for a natural disaster, any kind of declaration of emergency, where whatever the cause, the board ratifies what the county executive does. We don't have individual powers to create, to do that. It's all devolved upon the county executive.
That's absolutely correct, Vice Chairman Gross.
Is there additional discussion before we vote?
Madam Vice Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Alcorn.
Yeah, so just so I understand going forward, once we do this, what is the board's role in terms of basically overseeing any of this?
I think we will turn to staff for that. The issuance of a declaration of local emergency sets an emergency operations plan in motion. It also facilitates, as the chairman's newsletter indicated yesterday, it facilitates applications for federal and state disaster planning efforts, among other things. And really the third bullet point that I would add is that it serves as the foundational document for additional actions, if any, that the board may wish to take to address this emergency. It sort of sets the stage for anything you might wish to do with regard to this emergency going forward.
So,
yes, Mr. Chairman.
In summary, not only put us in a position to apply for state and federal assistance, but also gives us increased flexibility over what we had before the declaration, should the declaration pass.
Additional discussion or questions on the motion? Mr. Supervisor Faust and then Supervisor Harity.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think another benefit or value to this is that for our messaging, we can send the message to the community that this is, in fact, an emergency situation. This is all hands on deck, very serious situation. I think that this will help in that regard, and so I'm, obviously support it.
Supervisor Harity? Oh, I thought I saw your hand up. Okay. All right. For the new members of the board, you may also discover we don't have nearly as much authority as some people think we do. The mayor of the District of Columbia is able to do a lot of things as the mayor. People think we should be able to do the same thing, and that's not the case. By making this declaration, the county executive is the person who is empowered to make some of those decisions, but it shows that he has the backing of the board. So if somebody comes to us and says, you ought to close down this store, we can't do that as a member of the board. We can go to the county executive, indicate what has been asked for, and the county executive can make a decision perhaps. But actually, we're also at the mercy of the governor, who has taken a tremendous lead in Virginia in addressing this emergency.
Yeah,
Yes.
To that point, Madam Chairman, the governor does have an 11 o'clock press conference today, where he's going to be giving updated information to all of us in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I just want to be clear to your point, what this does is allows the county executive, obviously authorizes him to act on behalf of the board in several ways. It does not allow him to do anything that's inconsistent with state law or orders that the governor has put out. And so I just want to be clear on the idea of ordering a store closed.
Yeah.
That's not something that the county would be doing. If the governor made that declaration, obviously that's something we all would be adhering to, but we don't make that determination. And I just want to make that clear to the public, because it is consistent with your first thought, which is that people think we have a lot more authority than we do. And so I want to make that clear. And I also want to take this time, because obviously this is the only item on our agenda that we're voting on today, to thank a whole lot of people, because while we're in the middle of a crisis here, I think it's important that we recognize our employees at the health department, our public safety officials, really our entire county staff, because people, as I make my way around the county and around this building, people who work for this county are working their tails off to protect our community, both in the public and private sector, but particularly our county staff team here. The information that's been put out, the responsiveness, the timeliness, the fact that we are in an unprecedented time in this country, in this Commonwealth, and in our county. I can't say enough how much I appreciate the work of our county staff and the support that our community has given them throughout this trying time. And we know we may be in this for a while. This is not something that's going to be resolved tomorrow. And so it's causing strain on a lot of people. And I think all of us need to be mindful of that and what we expect from our county staff and what they're doing. And I had an opportunity yesterday to spend some time at the health department talking to the folks who are literally taking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls, thousands of texts from our community, and the information that they're giving out and giving people a sense of reassurance of what services are available to them, what options are available to them. Is unprecedented. And, I want to take a moment certainly to thank all of them. I also want to say that from my standpoint, while we're living in uncertain times, I want to be clear about a couple things to our community. First off, as I've told several people in our community, if you're going through this most difficult challenge that we're going through right now, I don't believe there's any better place in this country or this world to make it through trying times than in Fairfax County. And I think we have to reflect on the starting point that we have here with our resources, with our county staff, with our engaged community, with our business community, with really everyone who is pitching in to help. We will make it through this. We will have battle scars, without a doubt. But we will make it through this as a resilient community. But most importantly, let us not forget our starting point. And while we're going through struggles, there are far greater struggles in the world and in our United States than the struggles that we're facing here, in part because we're prepared and ready for these type of challenges when they come our way. And so to our residents, I want to make that message very clear that we will do everything we can to get through this. We're in a better position than about anywhere else in the world to make it through this because of our talented staff and community. And so while there's a lot of uncertainty and we're declaring an emergency today, there should be a lot of satisfaction in knowing that we are well resourced and ready to take this on, and that frankly things change every minute of every day. I've never been through a more fast evolving situation than this, and I also want to express my appreciation for my colleagues, because I've had a chance to talk to many of you. I know staff has talked to many of you. I know that you're dealing with a lot of calls in your own offices, a lot of concern among your own residents, and I'm very proud of the way we as a board have worked together and handled this to date, and we've got a ways to go here, but every board office I express appreciation to, and to your staffs, because we really are front lines with the community. And with us today, we can certainly ask some questions here in a moment, but with us today we have Dr. Gloria from the Health Department. It's been a tough time at the Health Department, and this is one of those moments where our Health Department officials become our first responders in so many ways. And the talented people who work under her, who are dealing with the day-to-day stuff, amazing work. And so we certainly can ask any questions of her. I do know that we've been in constant communication with her and with our county team and our county executive, and that will continue in the days ahead, each member of this board being in constant communication with county staff, and we will be messaging out everything as we know it, when we know it, as quickly as we can. And I thank the county executive also in particular for his outreach, his compassion, and his help in each of our board offices as we deal with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Supervisor Alcorn had another question or comment.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chairman. I just want to draw the board's attention, and actually anybody watching this, in the declaration, and I realize that's not the resolution we're voting on, but it's the companion document. There's a reference to the Fairfax County Emergency Operations Plan. Wonderful document. Good nighttime reading, a little over 250 pages. But I did want to just build on, Mr. Chairman, what you just said. Anybody who's really interested in sort of the mechanics of how Fairfax County government is addressing this, as you said before, there are plans, and I think that gives a really good overview of within county government what would go into effect. And how basically the different departments and agencies will coordinate and who's responsible for what and that kind of thing. So I would just note that is the one other document that's referenced in the declaration that would go into effect. So anybody that has an interest in seeing that can pull it offline, and I recommend they do that.
Yeah, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
On that point, and for members who have been on the board, remember when we adopted this and the amount of work that went into it. Any resident can go to the county web page, click on the search box, type in emergency operations plan, and it pops right up, a whole page of all of our emergency operations plans. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I think we're probably ready to vote, but before we do that, we do need to thank...
Madam Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm far away here.
I didn't see your hand.
Thank you.
Supervisor Walkinshaw.
Thank you. Yeah, just 2 points I wanted to make, and following up on the chairman's comments, I think it's important for the public to understand what this emergency declaration does and doesn't do. And if I'm understanding it correctly, and I think I am, it doesn't give us anything approaching emergency police powers or the implementation of any kind of a quarantine or curfew or even the legal authority to order private businesses to close. Those kind of actions would have to come from the governor and are not decisions we can make at the county level. So I think that's important for people to know. While we're taking an important step, our authorities in a lot of these matters are still pretty limited. And the second point is, I just want to thank our residents. I can speak for the Braddock District. I'm sure all of you have similar stories of neighbors coming together, working together to support each other and help each other, and we're going to need folks to continue to do that, certainly for the next several weeks. So thank you to all of our residents who are following the guidance, who are looking out for each other, having each other's backs, and we're going to need you to keep doing that for the next couple weeks.
Thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. Supervisor Palchik.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess following up on some of what my colleagues have shared, where we do have authority, right, and where I have heard from some of my constituents who also happen to be county employees, is for us to ensure the safety of all of our employees. I know we are going to be working under this emergency operations plan, and I do hope we and our constituents review it. I have had some questions, around our departments, especially employees with pre-existing conditions, how we're protecting those on the front lines in our Health and Human Services Department and our libraries, transportation, across the board. So I know our staff and our Brian Hill's team has been working on this, but perhaps if we could just clarify, maybe if not available today, in a follow-up, just how we are moving forward and with the continuity of operations plans, and just ensuring where we do have that authority for our own team, our own staff, is to have clarity on what are appropriate expectations, especially for employees who may be vulnerable or have family members who would be vulnerable in certain situations.
Thank you. Supervisor Palchik, I think I'd like to wait until we vote on this resolution before getting into some of that Q&A, if that's okay, because we do need to take action on these matters, and then we can have additional discussion about the Q&A. So I think we're ready to vote, and one of the things I'm going to ask the chairman to mention after we vote is the status of our committee meetings and the items in those committee meetings that were supposed to happen today. Also, want to thank the chairman and the new members of the board. I was saying to my staff yesterday, this is a really, really tough time for people who haven't had experience on the board before. And my staff reminded me that, well, you were 6 days in and you had a 40-inch snowstorm. And I said, yeah, but it melted. Mm-hmm. It was short term. You remember that, yeah. Mr. Chairman, because I think you were on Supervisor Kaufman's staff, and we were all brand new. But it melted. And so this is a long-term situation that we don't know where we're going to see the end of it. So thank you for everybody who has stepped up to the plate, and especially you, Mr. Chairman. You've done a brilliant job. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. At this time, before we adjourn, be happy to have any questions. As I said before, we do have limited staff here given the situation and the work that they're doing. We do have County Attorney Beth Tier, County Executive Brian Hill, Dr. Gloria Dewey-Yensu, the Director of our Health Department, as well as I know there's some other staff in the back in case we need to summon anyone for additional questions. But let me first ask County Executive Hill to respond to the questions that Supervisor Palchik just raised a moment ago. County Executive.
Good morning, all. Again, County Executive Brian Hill. I believe that I have messaged more to our team in the last week than I have in my first 2 years. I'm trying to get our guys, our staff, to talk with their directors and their supervisors to ensure that they are safe and sound until we are able to move forward with a telecommuting program, because there are things that are associated with our telecommuting program that is going to allow us to do our business. My goal, our goal, I'm hoping it's everybody's goal, is to keep our government open, but open and safe for all to work. We have 1.2 million people in our community who are expecting services, and we are trying to do it as best as we can in the circumstances that we have. The first thing that I wrote to the board as well as to the team is that families first. If you are sick or if you are feeling that you may be in a situation that compromises your health, please work with our team, with our staff, to see how we can mitigate those circumstances. Because first and foremost, their ability to provide the service to our residents is key, but their health and safety and welfare is even more important to me as the county executive. I appreciate Supervisor Palchek's comments. Every night, or every morning, I should say, that our group gets together to go over each and everything that happened the day before. I've never worked quite in this fashion, with things being so fluid and things changing so fast. 1 minute you hear 100, then you hear 50, now you're hearing 10 in meeting settings, and that all had transpired within 12 hours. Our guys are working feverishly to ensure that each and every staff member is protected, as well as providing the service that we should be providing to our community. You will be getting an update tonight, and you'll be getting an update more than likely every night until this crisis is over. Steadfastly, I will be communicating to each and every one of you, more than likely daily, just to let you know what I know. And our team is going to be communicating daily with you to let you know what we know. But you need to be somewhat patient with us because, again, at 11 o'clock, the governor is having a press conference. So everything we've going to be putting together this afternoon for your evening might change. So please bear with us. But the staff know the most important thing to me is their safety and their well-being. And we're going to work towards that first and foremost.
Thank you, County Executive Hill. And let me just add that there is a dedicated page of information for county employees that's been set up for them to review. There have been communications with the directors of the county agencies. We do give them the authority within their certain agencies to make certain determinations with guidance from the county executive and with our personnel guidelines. But I think it's important to point out that we have a very complex county. We have merit and non-merit employees. We have public safety employees. We have a whole hodgepodge of different activities, some deemed very essential, others available for telework and other opportunities. And so every agency within this county is a little bit different. And so there's not really a one-size-fits-all. And so a lot of that flexibility that remains at the director level is to recognize the different missions that those agencies play. And I think we've been clear from the beginning, and I appreciate the county executive's comments on the safety of our employees, because that is priority number one. Yep. We've reminded people of the CDC guidance about if you're not feeling well, please do not come to work. Stay home. And that's no different for our county employees than anybody else in this country that is trying to adhere to those guidelines. That being said, we've had a lot of hard conversations about the reality that a lot of our residents are dependent, more so now than ever, on the services that our county provide. And so when I've been asked why simply just close down, like some others have been able to do, it's not that simple, as everyone on this board knows, because there's a lot of services in our community that are essential to the health and well-being of our community. But we will never sacrifice the health of our own employees in accomplishing that mission. I had a conference call yesterday with I think almost every one of our employee groups on the phone, where we talk specifically about employees and what we're looking at, the range of things we're looking at for employees as we move forward. And so as recently as yesterday morning, we had a conversation about that. I had a conversation about that, but I know the county executive in your morning meetings every day is discussing that, constantly looking at how many people are showing up for work, how do we get more licenses for teleworking, which we've done. How do we make sure that agency directors use all the discretion they have to protect their employees' health over the weeks to come? And so that message I want to make perfectly clear. Other questions? Yes. First, Supervisor Gross, and then Supervisor Lusk and Supervisor Harity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's for the county executive. These are a couple of questions. One is resources for child care, not just for ordinary, daycare within a home. I think those are probably taken care of pretty well. But things like the ACA Child Development Center, child care centers that have, a couple hundred children, trying to accommodate their needs. It would be helpful if we had some information coming to us that we could advise folks. They're looking for resources to leverage. Right now, ACA's Child Development Center is closed for a couple of days, and they're going to reassess. So the whole child care issue is huge. So that would be one thing to look at. Also, the opportunity to perhaps extend deadlines. For instance, I think the deadline to apply for senior tax relief is April 1st. Doubt that we're going to be able to do that.
We have already extended that.
Has that already been
That's
extended?
already been
I had not
extended.
heard that. So as we look at what we have to do now, we need to make sure that people understand that maybe that the end date is not really the end date anymore, but we need to get that information out. I have especially appreciated your email, Mr. Chairman, that indicated what some of the utilities were doing.
Yeah.
We've had a number of inquiries about is the county going to provide rental assistance for people who may be in danger of eviction because of their inability to work. Probably not, but that's one of those emergency situations that we will have more guidance, I think, from the governor, and also that's why we need to have the flexibility to in declaring this emergency, because we do have to make some decisions. But people are going to have to do some things on their own. Absolutely, this is a time for personal responsibility and do things on their own, including things like buying only what you need, not everything in the store. So I look forward to getting additional information about, especially the child care piece. That's probably number one that people are concerned about. The others is, I believe all the park facilities are closed, but the trails and the parks are still open as far as passive activity. We're not going to lock up the parks. People will still be able to go outside. They just won't be able to do the regular sports games and things like that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Supervisor Lusk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little bit of my thunder has been stolen with regard to the child care issue. I brought this up, I believe, at our last board meeting, and I think it's still very, very imperative. There are many people, obviously, who can't afford child care based on the types of positions they have, the work that they're doing, and we need to be thinking about, with the schools being closed, supporting those individuals specifically. Also, I'm thinking of our own employees who are, going to be essential employees, needed to do some of the public safety response. Someone's going to have to watch their kids while they're deployed supporting our residents. So we need to be thinking about how we can support them during this time as well. Additionally, going back to Supervisor Palachek's concern about the county employees, I'm really trying to think if there's any special accommodation or allowance that will be made for those who are over the age of 60. Just thinking through that they're more at risk. Is there something that we can do proactively to help those employees, just recognizing that they're a little more vulnerable during this period, and making sure that we're giving them maybe first right of refusal for some of this teleworking. Next, I'm really trying to figure out and think about some of the mental health challenges that we're going to certainly see as a result of this crisis, thinking about both our employees and our residents. So, again, not asking for the answers here, but we need to be thinking clearly and specifically about what resources we're going to be able to provide through our healthcare and other programs to support residents, first responders, and those that are in our healthcare system doing very extraordinary work. And if I can just take one little pause here and thank Dr. Gloria Adeoyenzu for all that she's doing on behalf of the health department. I've been one of the people who's been calling her, and I know that she's been extremely accommodating. We're not trying to take her from doing her work, but she's been able to answer questions that have been specific to the residents in Lee, and I appreciate what she's doing, and Dr. Schwartz as well. And then I also want to give a plug for David Rohr. Dave Rohr has been extraordinary in this effort as well. His communication and the work that he's doing, I want to commend him specifically. So a couple more questions. I'm also concerned about those who are homeless and what we're going to do specifically to help them, because obviously during this crisis, they're the most vulnerable. So if they're sick, how are they getting care? If they need to be in some sort of special confinement area, what are we doing to help them get them off the street and get the service that they need so that we can eliminate the spread? And then I think last I'll say, I'm really trying to understand what we're doing for our contingencies as we think about Fairfax County Public Schools. We know we've made a decision to close them. The question is, how long are they going to be closed through the schools?
Just to be clear, Rodney, we did not make a decision to close the schools.
I'm saying collectively.
Right.
It's a part of the school board.
Right.
School board's made the decision to close. But the point is they're closed right now for a specific period. It could be that the closure could be extended. So the question is going to be, how are we going to address the issues that are going to be attendant as a result of that extended closure? Some of this will be on the school board side, but some of it's going to be squarely here with this board. So we've got to think about our response and what we're going to do to support that. So these are some of the things I'm trying to think through, and I think if we can get answers and clarifications in a number of these, it will certainly be helpful. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Lusk. And again, let me reassure you, every one of the topics you just read are things that I know we've had conversations about. We put some communications out. Last night was a whole memorandum from Health and Human Services about a number of things that we're working on with our vulnerable populations, with our homeless population. I'm going to let County Executive respond, but I also want to make sure that the communications that are coming out, that we really pay attention to those and get those out in our community. Because a lot of the questions that we're hearing from the community, not all of them, but a lot of them are answered in those communications. And so, we're having, as I said earlier, a lot of calls into the health department, which is good. People are having questions. They're asking questions. Many of the answers are already out there. Some of the answers to the questions that have been raised, we don't even know the answer to at this point. And while I'd like to be able to affirmatively answer every question we get, this is ever evolving every day. So our plan, we had a plan for child care, and that plan was upended entirely by the announcement about the size of gatherings. And so, again, we are beholden to a lot of things that are being declared by the federal government, by the state, and even where we've had plans in place that we were ready to deploy, the minute before we were ready to deploy them, the entire situation changed. And so that's where looking at the communications that come out from trusted sources like the county become really important, because we're communicating out as real-time information as we can. People need to also understand we don't have answers to a lot of the questions that are being raised, including some of the long-term questions, because we literally have to take this day by day, hour by hour. And so I understand there's frustration sometimes when there's not a definitive answer about something, but we are not in a position in some of these cases to be able to give a definitive answer that then doesn't change an hour later. And so that's where the fluid conversations that our staff is having become really important, and really important for us to message out what we're hearing from them precisely the way we get it from them, because we need to make sure that we're staying on that same message. And I really appreciate what came out last night from Health and Human Services, because it was an exhaustive list of all the things that we're doing and intend to do for our most vulnerable population. And that is something I hope we all get out to our community, including information in there about ways that our residents can help the most vulnerable in our community. And we're getting asked that question a lot. Let me ask the county executive to answer some of the issues raised by Supervisor Lusk. And let me remind the board, and everyone on this board has participated, and I appreciate that all of these questions and things we send in, we're going to get answers to. This is a long-term thing. We're not going to solve all of these problems sitting here today, but we have the talent and responsiveness of county staff to answer all of these things when it's appropriate and when the timing works, and that's not always controlled by us. County Executive Hill.
Thank you, Chairman McKay and Supervisor Lusk. Thank you for those comments. Dave Rohr is absolutely a treasure when we have a situation as such.
Yes.
But we have Tisha Deegan running H8, Department of Health, Housing and Human Services, who has provided you with an overview of from last evening and will continue to provide an overview. You know, the structure of how we're doing things are in my view, very phenomenal. Every morning, as early as 8 o'clock in the morning, there's about 8 to 10 people on a call going over everything that happened the day before. Then those same 8 to 10 people are thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, the next week, and following, predicated on where we are today. The problem I've been seeing is with the fluidity of this process and what changes on such a rapid pace, I have to give the team credit for being able to pivot so quickly. I know it seemed as though we might have was a little bit flat-footed in the beginning because we weren't understanding where all the other pieces were coming from. When you talk about child care, I have a big problem. Spring Hill, Lee District,
Yep.
Park Authority, guidance had to shut down. We're now trying to pivot to figure out how we can help them at least feed them. Yesterday, I was at London Town. I talked to Supervisor Smith, had people coming through there. The schools are doing a great job, but we're going to expand the food distribution process as we move forward. But we have to do this in a pragmatic way to ensure that we can offer the services that we are saying that we're providing. Because the one thing I do not want to have a conversation with this board is you offered to do X and Y did not happen. Right. So we are trying to work through this process. This is different than a government shutdown that happened last year. That, believe it or not, in my opinion, was easy compared to what we're dealing with today.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
So I thank you for giving the team kudos for what they're doing.
Right.
We are in a place right now where we're rolling along pretty well with the changes that happen, but change will happen as soon as 15 minutes from now when the governor speaks. Then I go back upstairs and revisit everything that we've been discussing. But I really appreciate your support.
Yes.
I appreciate your guidance. And trust me, every email, every phone call is important to us, but the volume is also important to us and how we are able to distribute what we need out to the community. Please go to the COVID website on the board, on our website for government services. That will tell you exactly what's happening on an instant. If you sign up for your text messaging, that will happen on an instant. But we need to be very careful in how we move forward for one simple reason. I will have to change how we move forward literally in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I will get you some more information about child care and homeless. We got some ideas about homeless as well. Right. We're just trying to figure out how we can deal with the homeless population, because then we do have a probability if we get them all in one area, or whomever's in one area, there is a chance for a spread.
Exactly. Right.
Mm-hmm. So we always have to be conscious of what's going on. And even today, no staff, they're all throughout looking in their office. We have space between board members. We have to practice what we preach. Right. And this is what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Supervisor Harity, Faust, and then we'll come on this side.
Well, I want to echo the thanks to the county executive and the health department, Tisha Deegan. The one that's been left out so far is OPA, because I think they've done an outstanding job, and they're one of the frontliners in this because they're the way we communicate to our citizens. So I think all of the public safety has done a great job. I think it is important to keep the government open and providing services. Absolutely critical along a whole host of reasons, but we need to do it safely and smartly. We've heard it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. But I'd throw on the end of that, it's a marathon, not a sprint, with course changes being thrown at you at the last minute, because you never know whether around the corner there's a hill or a downhill or a stream that you've got to get across. It really is. The only thing that's been constant about this has been the change. So very difficult environment to deal with. And I probably shouldn't say this. My staff hates when I say that. But, to put this in perspective, though, because people have told me this, our grandparents were asked to drop everything and go to war.
Yep.
This is something that we will get through, and we need to get through. We need to make sure our residents aren't panicking. It's going to be difficult, but we'll get through this. We as a nation have gotten through a lot harder and a lot more difficult circumstances, and we will get through this. A couple of questions that before I forget, tax relief, I'm glad to see that deadline. We need to look at the other deadlines and see if we need to extend those. If the county executive, I'm not going to ask him to do it in any time period, but, we need a plan for budget season and budget public hearings. We're in the middle of budget season, and this has got some pretty significant budget impacts. So I don't think I'm going to put a time on that request, but I know our budget chairman is thinking about that. But I've been thinking about how to handle it. It's good luck. No, I'm just. It's going to be a difficult thing to do because the revenue numbers are going to change, and it's going to be hard. I don't know about public hearings and it's all that. I do have one question. I know whether Dr. Gloria can answer this. And this one came out late last night, but the guidance to stay indoors. And I in a suburban environment. It's, to me, the physical and mental health of being outside, and as long as you're not in close physical contact. But there was guidance last night published to stay indoors. I don't know if there's thoughts on that.
I'm sorry. So I think the guidance about social distancing, which is making sure that you keep a minimum of 6 feet between you and others, is what it is. And so the limiting gathering, the number of people and that come to structured gatherings and so on, helps to achieve that recommendation for 6 feet. Now, staying indoors, I don't think is absolutely required, so long as you are making sure that you don't come in close contact with others. So part of it is the staggering of people at events. Like, for example, you had mentioned earlier about the county not necessarily shutting down. I agree with that because of the services that our residents require and need from us, but we can do that safely. We have to be creative about not all 15,000 of us showing up here. Those who can telework with consideration for people who might be at risk for severe disease. So the elderly, I think someone mentioned the elderly, and then not everyone needs to be physically present to be able to do their work. So for those people, prioritizing. There's some of us as well that absolutely need to be here to get the job done, but the mere fact of a certain proportion of us not having to be here, teleworking already reduces the number of people that normally are in a specific building. And then, taking steps not to congregate. You're at work, you get the work done, avoid meetings, face-to-face meetings, and using different approaches that we don't normally do to actually accomplish the same goal of providing services for our constituents. So sheltering in place is, I think, what you're referring to, which was a guidance that came from one of our jurisdictions, is not necessary in terms of absolutely staying in place. People are going to have needs, and so it's incumbent on you. Avoid crowded spaces. If you know you're a person who is going to be at severe risk because of an underlying medical condition or your age, just avoid those crowds. And then most importantly, those messages. This all comes down to washing your hands, covering your coughs and your sneezes, and staying home when you're sick, because it's unfortunately the sick people who spread disease.
So we can continue to encourage people to enjoy our parks and trails and outdoors, provided they keep the social distancing.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to confirm that because the stay indoors did confuse me.
No, I'm glad you did confirm it,
because for mental and physical health, you want to
Right.
get outside.
It's not being outdoors; it's what you're doing when you're outdoors.
Correct.
That is the issue.
Not gathering,
Yeah.
not to keep social distancing. I have two quick announcements, if I can. My teen job fair is something that some of our employers look to get a number of different things, a number of their employees from, so they're hurting. The kids need jobs. We are going to go ahead and do kind of an online version of that, so I would ask without objection that we have OPA work with schools to get that word out. We'll have it ready Friday.
Without objection.
Okay. My budget town hall, we're going to go ahead and do a virtual town hall, so we're going to keep the time and place. We'll have video and an opportunity for people to call in and ask questions, but that'll be Thursday at 7.
Supervisor, may I ask a question? Sorry.
Sorry, Supervisor Palchik.
To your first one, I think that's a great idea, Supervisor Harity. With the schools, will this now be expanded to all FCPS high schools, middle school students?
Oh, yeah, no, what I'm asking is that it go out
Perfect.
to all students. Yes.
I think that's a great idea.
FCPS has been a great partner in the teen job fairs. They've broadcast them to the entire school population, so this will also go to the entire school population.
Right. Okay. Supervisor Faust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to pile on and thank Brian Hill for the good work that he's doing, but also the sensitivity that he's demonstrated by communicating with the supervisors on such a regular basis. Truly appreciated. I know that it just extends your day, which is already longer than it should be. But thank you for your efforts. Really appreciate it. I wanted to comment on this is a marathon, not a sprint message. Everything I'm hearing is that the next couple of weeks are critical, absolutely critical in terms of trying to keep the curve from getting out of control. And so I think we must sprint for the next couple of weeks and do everything we possibly can to keep this virus from spreading. And by doing that, we are told by others that we will reduce the curve, which means the maximum demand at any given time on the hospitals, and we'll buy more time for testing and for other things. So I think right now is a very, very critical time. Everything I'm hearing tells me that, and if the health department wants to correct me, fine, but that's the message I'm giving. This is important. This is critical. If you can avoid contact right now, this is the time to do it. So the critical thing that's coming up, I mean, certainly how do we hold budget meetings is critical. I mean, good luck with that one, Jeff. But I think even more important right now is that we know that all the assumptions, all the criteria, everything that went into preparing an amazing advertised budget are being thrown against the wall. I mean, we don't know. Everything's changing. It's a new world. I don't want to get to April 14th and get a list of proposed changes based on changed circumstances. I don't, I would like to know sooner rather than later what we're going to do to, with respect to our budget, what we're going to propose to do with respect to our budget to address these changed circumstances. So, the sooner the better in terms of getting that information for our sake and for the sake of our constituents who still have the, obviously, the right to comment on what changes we might propose. So that is my request. Hopefully, Joe Mondoro is not in the room today because that's what he's back in his office working on. But I definitely think that the sooner the better, because I think it's going to be, the changes are not going to be insignificant.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Faust, and I'm glad you bring that up because County Executive and I have spoken. We're actually going to be speaking later today again, have a meeting to talk about that. I think everything that's been said is fair, which is we're in a whole new budget reality. And all of our projections now are going to be completely different, not just because of what's happening here on the ground, but obviously what's happening nationally. When the Fed cuts the interest rate to 0%, that has a profound effect on the county's budget and our own interest earnings. And so I've had conversations with the county executive, with Joe Mondoro and others already about contingencies and things that they are looking at, and so we're in the process of doing that. As soon as we have information that we can disseminate, we will. We've never gone through a budget situation like this before, where what was presented will be profoundly different by the time we have to adopt a budget. The good news is this is also the latest I can remember that we've had to adopt a budget, which is in the first week of May. And so we do have time to work on that, but we're very sensitive to making sure we get information as soon as we can out to folks so that they can comment on it. But we're also sensitive to the fact that so many of these are, just like in a normal budget year, are projections based on what's happening. And so we're already looking at those. We're obviously operating under a current budget, and so whatever budget we adopt in May will be for the next fiscal year. And we are already looking at what the implications are for that. And as I shared with our employees yesterday, it's fair to say that the budget that was presented is quite a bit off of what this board will end up having to adopt just because of what's happening in the world around us. And so excellent points, things I know our staff is already working on. And I'd ask County Executive Hill if there's anything you'd like to add.
Thank you, Chairman McKay and Supervisor Faust. Thank you for those comments. First up is third quarter. The third quarter that I was going to present to you is wildly different than the third quarter that we will be presenting. I'm going to be outreaching to every board member. We remember what you requested and talked about to us about third quarter, so we're going to be having that conversation because that's first up. The budget absolutely will be different and may need to have some tweaks made to it. We're going to put together a schedule of events so the board can be a part of how we're thinking and the processes that we're moving forward with. So you're not catching up, you're going to be right in the front of it because this change and this crisis has changed how we're moving forward with our budget. That will be, hopefully, within the next week or two, we're going to be sitting down trying to figure out what's best and how to move forward. But the interesting thing with the rate hike cut, or the rate cut with the Fed, that's a penny. I'm just going to put that to you. That is a penny worth of revenue lost by that cut. And we've already lost almost 2 pennies based upon the interest rate cuts over the past year. So you're talking about a wildly different budget, and depending on what happens with the governor's press conference, we could be seeing some other things happening with sales tax and revenues. So understood, we're already on it. We're just waiting to see what shoes drop so we can help provide with a path forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Would you finish, John?
Yes,
okay.
thank you very much.
Sure. Supervisor Smith and Supervisor Stork.
Thank you. I know the message we're all sending is about social distancing, but the information message, I think one of the easiest ways for the public to get messages is by getting the text alerts. I signed up for them myself. I don't have to go look for them. They come right to my phone. And so I just want to remind people, if they text FFXCOVID to 888-777. It is really wonderful information. It comes right to you because we do want to all stay informed about the best things to do to keep our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Smith. And amazingly, we had, in a very short period of time, over 17,000 people sign up for those text alerts. So it is a great way for people to get information. If you haven't done that, do that. Supervisor Stork.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and this is truly unprecedented times. I think we all recognize that. Every one of these unprecedented times is different, and this is sure different than the ones that we've experienced before, and obviously not to the degree, and frankly not to the novelness, to use the novel coronavirus as a kind of a corollary there. Again, I think our staff has done an awesome job. County Executive Hill, I appreciate your really almost routine calls at this point, and it does make a difference for us and makes a difference in my ability to share information. But even more importantly, I think to any of that is the emails and that are coming out from Deputy County Executive Rohr, obviously yourself, Dr. Gloria Adozenzu. We need information, and I think we're filling that with quality information, and I think that probably is somewhat different than maybe the past, which is we have the mechanisms and we're using them, and I think it's helping people to get the core and the basics of this, which the social distancing and the other elements, I think that truly can reduce the curve and hopefully reduce the amount of time that this creates for our communities to have to work through. Dr. Gloria, I had a couple questions I wanted to see if you could at least give us an update on. In your previous press conferences and the many pieces of information you've sent out to us, you've identified our community as a low-risk community or a low likelihood of transmission. So if you could just address where we are with that now, and then the other corollary, which I know has been a key part of at least your past assessment of that, of the category of low, is the issue of community transmission, which is truly the thing that we're working hard to avoid. If you could at least address that, where we are with that, and share where you think it's likely to go given the cases that are coming in.
So thank you for that. When we talk about community transmission, it's not necessarily about numbers, but it's about outbreaks within a community. Currently, every single individual that has been a confirmed case in Fairfax County, there is that individual, those cases are linked to either international travel to a hotspot, or they've been a direct close contact of someone who has been diagnosed with COVID. That is different from the situation where a person is diagnosed with COVID and there is no epidemiological link to a known case or a source. That happens when you have more widespread disease in a community, so that it is difficult to pinpoint the source of disease. Like during flu season, we know we have widespread flu, and it's hard to tell where you get your flu. You know, if you were to come down with the flu, it's sometimes difficult to say exactly where you got it from, and that's because it's everywhere. You may have picked it up at the grocery store, you may have picked it up at some other place. That is community spread, sustained community spread. We currently in Fairfax County, and disease transmission is localized. So what is happening in Fairfax County does not necessarily have to be the case in Washington or in New York or wherever. In Fairfax County, as we look at the cases and we do our contact investigations, And that's part of contact investigations, to see who else may have been exposed, so you can get to that person, hopefully before they become symptomatic, and then can put and can contain the possible spread of disease. So all the cases, as I said, are linked to either a case or travel to a hotspot, and I know that up until now, people have said, well, if you're able to test, if there was more testing available, then you would have a baseline. You have the real denominator of who all has been infected. Yep. So that process in terms of testing is becoming more available, although it still has its kinks, and that needs to be worked out. But as of, let's say, through the weekend, as of yesterday, we got information on 65 tests that have been done commercially. And of those 65 tests, all 65 were negative. That's good. So that is in comparison to the 30 plus or so that we have done and the 11 cases that we have to date. It kind of supports what the epidemiologists in our department and the work that we've been doing suggests that as of this time, we have no evidence. I cannot prove it, but we don't have evidence of sustained community spread. Will that stay like that forever? No, but that's what at least we have at this time, and that's why we take a very aggressive approach to our contact tracing when we find a case, so that we can try and identify anyone who could potentially become a case and infect others, and ask them to self-quarantine if they're not symptomatic until the incubation period is passed.
So we have a lot of still very positive news in Fairfax County, but it doesn't mean it will continue that way, particularly if we don't implement the kinds of steps that we're telling everybody to implement. So I think it's the good news, and we have to keep it good news, and the way we keep it good news is that we make sure that we keep ourselves apart and we minimize our contacts, and we look for ways to frankly, just to stay healthy. I mean, in my mind, be outdoors and exercise and drink lots of water and eat well, et cetera. All the things that are really a key part of living a healthier life in this particular time are beneficial and make a difference. Do we know, and is there any indication about when testing could become more widespread or when it could be more available? Because right now, at least the doctors have to prescribe that to get the test because of the limited supply. Do we see that changing any time in the next few days or weeks or months? Any sense of that?
So I can't really give you time, but every day it gets better. So as LabCorp and Quest have come on board, again, these 65 tests that I just talked about wouldn't have happened, so it gets better. There's some kinks in the system, like everything that is rolled out. Sometimes it's about the kit itself, and then sometimes on the lab side, they have issues with reagents. But these are all challenges that are being worked through. So hopefully, in the not-so-distant future, those kinks will be worked out. But there is testing that is happening in commercial labs.
I work with both. I mean, in my day job, I work with both LabCorp and Quest, and they're, again, very well-run organizations, and I know they're eager as the rest of them to have that ability to test. So thank you. Just two more points. One is that I support the proportionality that we've had in Fairfax County. I think that's important, that when we have the science that says we should do this, we've done it, and we don't have the science that says we should do something else, we haven't done it. I think that's a key part of managing this and managing it very well, I believe, as you and our county executive and our chairman have done. The other thing is we have a severe problem with for individuals, and particularly individuals that are in small business or work for themselves, self-employed. It's almost catastrophic in a few industries. And for example, one individual I spoke with today who had more than 200 employees as of Friday has only 12 employees as of today and believes that as of the end of this week, it may be down to 2 or 3. And the issue of the business survival is significant. So having a sense of support to that is, I think, a crucial next step. I know I'm looking for the governor and others to address the things that I think we've already addressed to some degree at the county level, but the state level, the federal level, I know there's some issues that have been brought forward, but anything we can do to reduce the need to spend dollars on their part, because the way businesses truly work, at least mine and I think most others, is that whatever income you're getting today is to pay for your bills yesterday, and hopefully it is for the bills yesterday, not the bills that are coming in today. And that means that you're constantly in a cash flow bind. And the sales tax that's due for most businesses, due in a matter of a couple weeks is a key part of that, what they pay to the state. And there are many other areas. So I think it's important that we continue to lobby for that. Reached out to EDA and Victor Hoskins about what they were doing and could do, and he's mentioned some things that they're working on. I know that they're talking with the chairman and the county executive about as well. But I think all those things are pieces of a puzzle, but we have a huge landscape and a lot of pieces that we need to bring together if we're truly going to emerge into a way that's going to keep folks who, like I did when I started my business, mortgage their house and frankly are at risk, or people who don't have much to begin with and don't have a job now because they've had to be let go because there's not work for them. So I know we're all sensitive to that, but we have a huge challenge in front of us, and I know we're all going to do our best to try to minimize the impacts that we're now facing. But thank you all very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Stork. Supervisor Palchik, are you fine?
Yes, no, I appreciate Supervisor Stork addressed. I wanted to mention, and actually publicly thank so many of the businesses, especially in my district, who have quickly shifted, taken precautions, and I know are doing everything they can to protect their employees, to try to keep them in their jobs and employed in this very, very challenging time. So I do want to thank all of those businesses, especially some of our small, locally owned businesses that are really struggling along with us in our community. So we are in this together. I agree with you, Supervisor Harity. We will get through this. It will be tough. This is a very sobering St. Patrick's Day. And to that, do ask, especially those, in my age group, it's not about you. It's about the vulnerable people in our community. So please take precautions today. We do want to keep flattening that curve, as I said, and it does take personal responsibility.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good point.
Just very, very quickly.
Okay, hold on a second here. Hold on a second. I've got some folks who haven't been recognized yet. Is it on that specific point?
I got a very interesting email along those lines from a constituent that brings to light what we just did today. It says, I have a small business that's impacted by the coronavirus. I was directed to the SBA for a temporary loan. The initial response is denied because Fairfax County has not declared a state of emergency.
Right.
I thought the state. So I just thought in our discussion of small business, what we did today is very important. And
yes.
It is going to help our small businesses as well as grants and aids and other things. So.
And is another explanation of how complicated all of this stuff is that we're doing and how all of these pieces fit together, which is why I wanted us to get together today to make this declaration, because it has been a challenge for other things. And again, a lot of the questions, comments we're making, again, very fluid. So with that, I want to, was it on that point, Supervisor
Actually, it was
Gross?
on a point that Supervisor Smith brought up. I just got an email from someone.
We're all getting emails as we're sitting here, and actually the world is changing again in Richmond underneath our feet. So we do want to wrap up here relatively quickly, because the concern I have is the information that we're sharing here now, we're all looking at our phones, is already outdated by what's happening around us and shows how fluid this is. So we're going to try to sum up quickly. So we've done what we needed to do, which is pass the emergency declaration and let our staff get to work and responding to what's happening in Richmond so that we can quickly communicate that to our constituents.
The concern is about the sign-up rate for the text messages. The question was, what can be reliable sources of information for non-English speakers, Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, increasingly more South Asian languages like Urdu and Farsi. I've sent this off to Tony Castrilli, but it does point up the need for not only clear messaging, but in multiple languages and through multiple sources in those languages. So just something we hadn't really talked about, and it is really important for most of our districts.
Okay. Supervisor Alcorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few quick things. First of all, I also have a budget town hall scheduled for this Saturday at 10 a.m., virtual budget town hall. I think I'm going to go forward with that, but basically we're going to hear so many changes in the budget. I think I might have to do another one later as well. We might all want to think about that. I'm not going to repeat what's already been said. I've also been hearing from small businesses in Hunter Mill. So one thing that hasn't been noted yet is basically they're going to have to keep paying rent. And there's a related issue that I want to bring up relating to housing. At some point, if this drags on, we may need to have a conversation with the sheriff about eviction policy. So I just want to put that out there, because if this does go on for multiple weeks and months, we want to make sure that, frankly, people that may be in line to be evicted and put out on the street are not done so if a emergency is still going on. Very quickly, I want to also note good discussion about child care. In yesterday's communication from on human services, human health and human services update, there's something I really want to point to the board. This is another child care issue we need to pay attention to. The Office for Children is also working to identify community child care programs that may be able to serve essential personnel in the coming weeks. I just remind everybody that if we do get to a point where people, our healthcare workers, our first responders, we're going to need to make sure that they can come to work and that they have child care. So thank you, Office for Children, for doing that. And I did want to ask, I think this is really important to follow up on the conversation with Dr. Gloria earlier. We hear a lot. We know, and we're talking a lot about flattening the curve. And I guess I would ask Dr. Gloria, considering that I know we have 11 identified cases. We now have, I believe, 65 from LabCorp and Quest Diagnostics. Where are we in the curve in Fairfax County now?
We haven't even.
We're not on the curve yet.
No.
We're still on a line. We're still on the line. We haven't even started the curve.
That's correct.
That's good news. But I would also just point to the board. That's something we're going to need to watch very, very carefully, because, you know, the longer this drags out, the more we're going to have to pay attention to the data, and basically when things open back up is going to become a very interesting question.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I will, recognize Dr. Gloria, because she's been doing nothing but looking at the data every step of the way, and that will continue. The data that they have, the information they have at the health department, the reporting that they're getting. One of our challenges has been our local data doesn't always match up with what's happening in the country around us. And so our constituents are watching national news, and something different is happening there than what might be happening right in our community. And so we need to be cognizant of messaging out both what's happening locally, but also acknowledging what's happening nationally, because that could in an instant be happening here, could already be happening. And so they're constantly looking at the data and making sure that their messaging is cognizant of the data, but also cognizant of the real world and things that are happening around us. Okay, Supervisor Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick questions for Dr. Gloria. The first could be in the category of changing given the governor's announcement, but one of my biggest concerns is with our senior properties, and specifically talking about our housing authority owned senior properties, and I represent the Glens, Little River, Ollie, and Braddock Glen, and according to the memo that went out We're closing the common areas and putting up additional signage, I'm sure undertaking additional cleaning. But it doesn't seem like at this point we're doing any health screening for visitors to those senior properties. And I just want to get your opinion as to whether that's necessary or when it could become necessary. Second, to Supervisor Alcorn's question, clearly the contact investigations that you and your team have been doing have been successful thus far, and I think the folks doing those investigations are the real heroes of this effort. But we obviously have to plan for potentially a significant increase. So, and these are labor-intensive investigations. What are our capabilities in terms of conducting more investigations? If we have 100 cases, is it even feasible to continue conducting the same kind of investigations? Do we need to look at additional resources? Should we look at other county agencies and departments being trained to do that work to help you? Or is there a certain point where it's no longer feasible to do it at all and we have to look at different strategies?
So that's a good question. If you recall, when we did the presentation, we talked about having basically two strategies: containment and then mitigation. And we were sort of somewhere in between containment and mitigation. So the contact investigations and so on are part of the containment strategies. But we recognize that at some point it is not possible to continue to do so with the resources that you have. And then sometimes it's not even necessary because it is here, it's widespread. So then the mitigation strategies, which is some of the things that we're talking about now, the closures and so on, that's when they really come in handy for you to basically force people not to mingle and to sort of flatten that curve that we tend to talk about, to limit the number of people that become infected and sick and so on and so forth. But at this time, as we do have the resources and the contact investigations have been quite straightforward in terms of, for example, what we did at Lynbrook Elementary School, for example, we were able to wrap our hands around the people who were close contacts, students and teachers, and were able to call each of them to determine whether they were symptomatic or not. And for those who were symptomatic, we were able to provide them with the testing yesterday. Public health never relies on just containment. We recognize that containment breaks down at some point, and so then we go into our mitigation.
So at the point when your office can no longer handle the number of contact investigations that are necessary, then you switch to an entire mitigation strategy. It's not a question of trying to ramp up those resources and do even more contact investigations. You just flip a switch.
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the senior properties.
So for seniors, I think there are a number of, so we talked about a 3-arm approach to in terms of non-pharmaceutical intervention. So we had the personal arm, which are the things that we're telling people to do, the hand washing, covering up coughs and sneezes, and staying home when sick, the self-quarantine, self-isolation. That's one arm. And then you have the next arm, which is the community strategies, the social distancing, the mass gathering, closures, and so on and so forth. And then you have the environmental aspect of it, which is the cleaning and so forth. So the strategies that have, or the actions that have already been put in place could be augmented with what you're suggesting, which is people monitoring themselves. You know, you can self-monitor, and if you have fever, and especially in these times, and you develop a cough, for you not to go out, for example, as one thing. For people who are coming into a building with the elderly, take those same precautions. Recognize who is at risk, and I think the message is the same regardless of where you're going, which is we, as individuals of this community, need to take the responsibility to take the personal actions, the things I just talked about, and then staying home. When you wake up and you feel like you have a fever and you have a cough, your going out might put someone else at risk. And this is how diseases spread all the time. Unfortunately, we are never able to pinpoint that person A got ill as a result of our actions. But when you take influenza, for example, every year in this country, over 200,000 hospitalizations, up to 30,000 deaths. These are people that were exposed by somebody, me, you, all of us in our community. And a very innocuous action, like sitting in an elevator with a young baby, 4 months old, you being ill that day, coughing, you walk out the elevator, you go about, do your business, you don't know what you just did, which is maybe as a result of that, here is a 4-month-old baby that 3 days later develops symptoms and is struggling for his or her life. So that personal responsibility is so strong. There's a lot of talk right now about closure and all those things which are important. But I think sometimes that drowns the personal responsibility. These viruses aren't just flying in the air, just making targets, they are as a result of somebody who is infected being in close quarters with someone else who is not infected, and that individual not practicing good respiratory hygiene, coughing, sneezing, using of your hands to wipe your sniffles and all those things, shaking hands. And so it's the personal, these are all actions that we personally do to infect one another. And so I'm hoping that as we do these, as a government, we make these recommendations for mass gatherings and so on, that people not forget the personal responsibility. If you step out of your house and you are sick and you have a cough and you don't cover your cough, you use a bathroom and sneeze and so on, and you don't wash your hands, you are being irresponsible. And that lack of action in terms of the hand hygiene and the respiratory hygiene that we've been trying to encourage people to do, not doing so is irresponsible and puts others at risk.
So, Dr. Gloria, thank you for that message. Needed to be said. I actually think we're going to wrap on that message because, honestly, even the conversation you just had about seniors has been outdated by the governor's press conference, and I think this shows to how fluid these conversations are. So we could sit here and tie you up all day talking about these things. We're not going to do that because we need to respond to the governor's press conference. Among the things that were in there, we're urging 65-year-olds plus to self-quarantine at this time. So there's a lot of things coming out of Richmond that have even outdated the conversation we started an hour and a half ago here. So we're going to wrap up with that, with Dr. Gloria's message. I'm going to remind the public of a few things that we heard here today, which is to go to the COVID website that's been set up. Make sure you're getting information from trusted sites. Sign up for the texting, as Supervisor Smith acknowledged. The county will continue to provide services as long as we can, cognizant of the safety of our own employees as we move forward. Clearly, we don't want people to panic. We want them to follow the guidelines, follow the good advice, and make sure that they are being part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And as Dr. Gloria just mentioned, practicing some self-responsibility for making sure that you take care of you and your family, helping out neighbors, but doing it in a safe way, and taking some personal responsibility that we need everyone to do that in order to succeed as we move forward. And with that, the county executive wanted to be recognized. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Chairman McKay. Again, on that COVID website, we have health info, we have county operation info, And most importantly, as Supervisor Stork mentioned, there's also small business info as well as school info. So as we have changed how we operate our government, we tried to put things in one place so everybody can see what's happening on real time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And as you said, in real time, that stuff will be updated as fast as we possibly can. And for questions that you don't know the answer to, refer to that web page. If there's something we're missing, all of us know our districts and communities better than anyone else. So if there's something that we're missing or an issue that hasn't been addressed, obviously continue to communicate that to our staff so that they can be responsive to concerns that we have in our districts, and continue to update the web page to give our public the best information that we have as soon as we possibly have it. And so with that, if there are no other items to come before the board, we are adjourned.